Hey guys, it's Alana and welcome back for another episode of Seeing Other People. We have a really fun episode coming up today. We are bringing on the wonderful ladies from Excuse My Grandma, Kim, Merstine, and her grandma, Gail. And we're going to talk about a lot of different things about the differences between dating back then when Grandma Gail was dating versus dating now, modern dating for millennials and Gen Z, and the way Kim and I date. And we get some really cool insight. We definitely disagree on a few things, and it's a really, really exciting episode. And I'm so appreciative that they came on the show. So before we get into it, I just want to say thank you to everyone. Some of you know this and some of you might not, but I've had a really, really tough week, like one of the hardest weeks I've ever had, really. My dog, Zoe, who was way more than a dog to me. She was truly like my purpose and my like best friend. And I've had her since I was 15. So really through like the most transformative years of my life, she's always been there. She unexpectedly and suddenly passed away, and it has been incredibly hard and painful. And I really am so grateful for everyone who's reached out and sent their love. And I know many of you have not met her, but the messages that you've been saying are like, you could tell how loved she was and how amazing she was. And that really does mean a lot to me. And I've done a lot of reflecting and thinking this past week. Every day is kind of a new battle in itself. But it's just reminded me how important it is to tell the people in your life how much you care about them and how special they are to you, and to make sure that they know truly like how much you love them in your life and how much they mean to you. Because I know we always hear like life is so short, you never know what's going to happen, but you really don't. Obviously, like Zoe was 11 and a half. Like as dogs get older, you know their life is going to come to an end, but like she had a few more good years ahead of her, and this like freak thing happened, and you never know what could happen. And I think the most important thing we can do in our lives today and every day is just let the people in our worlds know how much we care about them and make them feel loved when they are. So I don't want to get too deep into it or too like emotional or anything like that, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there and again, thank everyone who's reached out. If I haven't responded to you, I am sorry. It's just been a bit overwhelming, and I'm definitely taking my time with it. And yeah, I'm very, very excited for this episode. And of course, if you guys are loving what you are hearing or even just liking it a little bit or getting a few laughs or some good advice, please, please, please hit me up with a 5-star rating and review. You can do that on the Apple Podcast app. Just go to the show page, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you'll be able to do that. There are some not nice reviews, and I would love some nicer ones. And it just really helps with the show and growing our audience and our amazing community. And of course, if you're not yet following Seeing Other People on Instagram, do that. You can also follow what the show and I are up to on Twitter at Alana Dunn, on TikTok at Alana Dunn, of course, at Alana Dunn on Instagram as well. And yeah, if you like what you hear, send it to a friend, send it to 5 friends, 10 friends, head to the Patreon, patreon.com/seeingotherpeople, doing bonus episodes over there, doing profile revamps and happy hours and some fun stuff. And I love that opportunity to get to know all of you even better and more, so I can really help you out even more. So, okay, now we will get into the episode. Excuse My Grandma, Kim, Merstine, Grandma Gail. Let's do it. Well, thank you both so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you. I've been looking forward to this episode for a while. And just to everyone listening, before you listen to this episode, please actually leave and go to Excuse My Grandma and listen to the episode that I recorded with Kim and Grandma Gail recently. It's on their feed. And then you can come back and listen to this.
Sounds good.
As we get into it, I would love if you both would introduce yourselves. Kim, would you start and introduce yourself with what year you were born in, what your current relationship status is, and how you met the last person you were with, whether that means went on date with, dated, or currently in a relationship with, married, whatever that may be.
Okay. I was born in 1996 in New York City, so I'm 25 years old. And I'm currently single. Love that for me. And my last serious relationship, like the one that I had for 4 years, that I got out of a year ago, I met in college, like at a frat party through mutual friends kind of vibe. But I kind of love the question because it doesn't have to be the last person you really seriously dated, just the last person that you're like seeing, in which case I would probably say like from dating apps, because that's my go-to nowadays. Except for Grandma Gal sometimes tries to set me up. We did one of those yesterday.
Has that worked yet?
Okay.
No.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know about the one from yesterday. It's only, but usually it has not in the past.
Hey, you never know. There's always next time. Grandma Gail, take the floor. Introduce yourself.
All right. I'm not giving you my age.
You say it all the time.
Oh, all right. Okay. I was born in 1942.
Don't you love how I can get her to do whatever?
She does. She is my boss. I don't understand this.
I'm a granddaughter.
And I grew up in Westchester, got married at the age of 21 and lived in New York City and have lived, we're married 57 years and we're basically living in the same area we've lived for 57 years.
Wow.
And I raised 2 children in the city.
And how did you meet your husband?
Well, we met on a family fix-up. I was dating somebody from the U of P. We had a bad breakup. It was, I thought, the love of my life, and I was very crushed. And my aunt and uncle were at a party at his my husband's parents and home, and they said, we have a niece, and they said, well, why don't you meet my son? And they met and they talked, and he took the number and called, and we sort of went out in the beginning for a bit. He went to Harvard, I was at Syracuse, and it was a very different kind of mental relationship together.
Hold on.
True.
You went to Syracuse?
I went to Syracuse.
I went to Syracuse.
Oh, I was at SDT.
Oh my goodness. Okay, AE5, but almost sisters.
All right, that was my mother's.
Wow, we're all related.
Oh my God, there's 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
I love it.
But I love your first date story. If we have time, your first date story with Poppy, like a quick version of it, because it's so
quick
cute.
Version. No, it was a second date,
Oh.
and I lived in Westchester. He lived on the island, and he said, "Let's go to theater." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I love theater!" So he picked me up in Westchester, which is a big thing from where he lived, and we went into theater and we saw an off-Broadway show, and I was sitting there and I was absolutely awful. And we went on to dinner afterwards, and he said, "Did you like it?" And I said, "I think it was the stupidest play I've ever heard." And the author happened to have been a Harvard graduate that he sort of knew. And he said, "Oh, I think it's brilliant." And that was the end. We had dinner, and I didn't hear from him for several weeks, which never happened to me. And he wasn't so great that he shouldn't call me back. So I was a little offended. And finally, I get a call about 2 weeks later, and he says to me, "It's David, and blah, blah, blah. You know, I feel terrible that I haven't called you, but I thought you were stupid because you didn't like the play."
Oh
and
my
he said,
God.
"But I listened to my parents talking, since they went to see the show after us. And my father, who's also a Harvard graduate, and my mother, who's a Wellesley graduate, said that was the dumbest play I've ever seen." So he said, if my parents, who I knew were brilliant, thought it was dumb, I better give this girl a second call.
I kind of understand his reasoning there.
Yeah, well, he was very
How are
uptight.
you not offended?
He was very uptight. Well, I wasn't offended because I thought he was crazy to like it. And I really was so, I guess, being a Syracuse graduate, I didn't give a damn.
Yeah.
If he didn't call me back, I had 5 guys on the Thursday and Friday night slot. So
Need that energy.
it didn't bother me.
Yeah.
Okay, so
But anyway, we got married shortly afterwards.
it all worked out. So tell me
It all
about,
worked out.
do you actually mean like you had 5 guys on the Thursday and Friday night slot? Like how
Yes.
did that work? How did dating and having people, like, how did that happen?
Well, it's a completely different dating scene, as we know that. First of all, we didn't sleep together, so that was a number one thing. There was no physical intimacy, so you didn't have that part of the relationship to deal with. And you would have dates that were designated Thursday night dates, Friday night dates, Saturday night dates, and they would be consistent. You would almost do it every week, and then sometimes the Friday night date moved up to Saturday night, or the Saturday night would go back to Thursday night if you didn't
Friday
like
and
them.
Saturday were the prime nights. That's the same
Yes.
now. I feel like if you have a Tuesday night date, which like usually a first date is, you like
Yeah.
know that like they're probably doing something better on Saturday, but then
Right.
you get like eventually bumped
Well, I
Yeah.
think everything is almost the same. The only difference was that we didn't really have relationships like you girls and guys have today. It was a very different thing. And we didn't carry on for years and years because everybody wanted to go to sleep with that person. So we said, well, we got to get married. And, you had different issues with pregnancy, different, it's a whole different, you were talking about the 60s and the late 50s, and it was not the same as dating. I actually think our dating was sort of better. The only problem came in for the women in the 70s when everybody realized that they had missed out on careers. So a lot of them really went through a nervous breakdown period and got divorced or had issues. And so that was the biggest difference, that you really didn't have as many women in the career field, which I think was the sad part of our dating.
Yeah, I think that makes sense because I feel like there were such specific gender roles back then.
Correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it was always like the husband was the breadwinner and the wife stayed at home, took care of the house, took care of the kids, and like raised the family.
Well, that was basically it. Unless the woman was either a lawyer or a doctor, which there were some, and I knew them, or and they were very, very bright. But most women, if we got married young, don't forget, most of us got married when we were 20, 21. So you made a commitment very early on where your path was going. And if you were going to graduate school or law school or medical school, that was part of an agreement you had together with your spouse. But I would say a good 70% really were not career women.
Got it. Okay.
Did a lot of charity work. We did good things for the community, which is very, very important. And still, many do, even taking that role today, do the same thing, which is fine. And as long as no one looks down on it and we raise good families, it's a judgment. It's a judgment call on what you want to do.
Yeah. So in terms of, so you obviously met through like a family setup situation. What were the other ways for people to meet at that time? If let's say there wasn't somebody like for the family to set you up with, or that didn't happen, how else could you actually meet somebody, date, explore who you would like to end up spending your life with?
From what I knew about was you either met through a synagogue or through a church, or you had common interests in a club where you would be. Many people
Not like One Oak, like a
a country club. Yes. All right.
Not like disco.
You really had very controlled dating places where you could meet. First of all, you weren't going into a bar. Women just did not do that. I mean, that was just, forget it. So if you didn't meet in college or in graduate school, where I would say most people did meet and get married, then you had to go on either family fix-ups or friends fix-up, or some form of social club where your families belonged or where you joined and you met up. It was a very controlled type of dating. And you basically didn't deviate. I mean, there were very few that deviated from those norms.
Yeah. So, okay, one question I want to start with Kim. When you either get introduced to someone, let's say there's a family setup, or I mentioned somebody to you last week, what is the first thing that you usually do?
Good question. Look them up on Instagram. Then I'm going to go with, it's hard. Well, obviously social media is the first thing that I do. I'm trying to think of if I could rate it like Instagram, then Facebook, then LinkedIn. I think that's what I would say. Then if I really am bad with like background checks. Like most dates I go on, like I either do nothing or just look at those three or even one of those three. But then if we were going to be like a little bit more good about it, I guess I would see what mutual friends we had. Maybe like if it's a close enough friend, text them and ask what they think of the person. Maybe do a little Google search. But usually it's just like the social media aspect.
And Graham Miguel, what would you do if somebody introduced you to somebody or recommended you go on a date with someone?
We just went. First of all, we wouldn't go unless we knew the person who recommended us. So, it was I can't, first of all, we lived in a small town where everybody sort of knew each other. Where families would reach out. Oh, I have a single daughter. I have a single son. Why don't we all meet? It was a much more family oriented fixing up of course, we didn't have dating apps. That would never have even, we didn't even know what
You
dating apps were.
didn't?
We didn't have, no, that's all your generation. And it was, I actually think it was a nicer way. It was less complicated. And you didn't have to worry that you were going to probably meet a stalker or some crazy loony person that came out of nowhere. But
you had less options.
no question.
As you said, now like the world is kind of like our oyster. Like we can meet someone random at a bar. We can meet someone on Instagram or on a dating app. And like that's why I feel like if I was limited, wouldn't you always be wondering what if that other person is out there and I just don't have access to them?
Well, that's one of the problems, I think, in the dating in 2021.
Yeah.
I think you have too many options.
Yeah.
So you've stopped committing to one person for fear that you've missed a better guy next door or a better girl. It works both ways for the men and the women. They're getting, the guys have got a whole palace of girls in front of them on these dating apps. They can look at you. Oh, I don't like the way you part your hair. Slap her off. I mean, it's
swipe which way
or slap.
Which way is wrong?
Slap
which way is right?
Left is wrong.
Should we start saying slap left and slap right?
I mean, it's just, I think it's harder to get into a relationship today than it was in the 60s. The 60s, if you were, not the late 60s. Late 60s, everybody was on drugs. Nobody knew what they
So the sweet spot was like 58 to 64.
Correct. Yeah. Not even 64. It was about over in 64.
Right.
It started getting very raunchy.
All right, everybody. I have 3 words for you. Mindset, wellness, CBD. That's right. I am absolutely obsessed with Mindset, Wellness, CBD and all of their CBD gummies. But right now, my favorite are definitely the Focus gummies. I can't even tell you how many different projects I have, the podcast, some of my other clients. I can't even talk about all my projects because I can't talk about them yet. And I wake up with the world's longest to-do list every day. And I take a Focus gummy and I get through it. And it's pretty painless. And I feel like excited to get through it because I have this little bit of help from these Focus gummies that just help me pay attention and power through it all. And whether you are in college, you are starting a new job, you just have a lot of work to do while you're working from home and you feel like it's all homework, these Focus gummies will be such a game changer. Head to mindsetwellnesscbd.com and hook yourself up with some. And while you're doing that, we'll hook you up with 10% off and free shipping by using the code Seeing Other People. Get your Focus gummies. So did you, when you were dating in this like super like small town, like where you kind of knew everyone, did you ever wish that you could date elsewhere? Or like, I can imagine obviously like long distance probably was not a thing when you couldn't call, you couldn't just like hop on a quick flight across the country. Cause like I've dated a lot of people. I've like being in New York, I've been in long distance relationships from here to California. And a lot of that surrounded like texting all the time, FaceTiming, being able to have that constant communication. And I wonder, when do you think you noticed that even starting to happen?
You have to answer that, Kimmy, because I have no idea.
First of all, I can't even think like how long distance was possible before FaceTime. Like, and we lived through it. Obviously, FaceTime's like somewhat of a recent thing, but that's such a game changer for long distance within itself. But I think the question was more for you, like that. How did you do long distance when you didn't?
We didn't.
Yeah.
There was
so
no
what
such
about
thing.
if someone was like in the army?
Well, then you waited. Then you were either engaged or pinned, and you waited for the guy or the girl to come
Isn't
home
that, like,
from
horrible?
service. Well, I don't
Like,
know.
you
I
can't
didn't. You know what? That was just a norm. I mean, people did many things. I mean, don't forget dating was much. It was much simpler. You at 21, 22, a girl would say, "Oh my gosh, if I don't get married by the age of 23, you're an old maid already." Unless you're going into a career where you had to go to keep going at a university. But most girls graduating college, by the time they were 21, 22, they were engaged.
I just feel like long distance is like the evil of all evils. Like, I don't know anyone who has enjoyed long distance ever.
Well, it's hard.
It's so hard.
It's hard.
To me, it's not worth it. I mean, maybe if
Well,
I
it's
met
worth it if it was the right person.
Or no,
But
or I think it's worth
difficult.
it. I think it's worth it if there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
Like it's for a year when they're working and you'll be together again. But
Agreed.
like I live in New York and he lives in California permanently. Like, come on.
No, that can't work.
can't.
Somebody has to give up their location.
But then again, there's also like some people I know are bi-coastal.
Mhm.
So like I think that I could see working, but it's still very hard. But it's like, at least you'll have like 6 months out of the year with the person.
But I think that's very difficult to be
of
with.
course.
That realistically, that doesn't work. There's always going to be somebody that gets into that other 6 months. That's an issue. Can't have 6 months away from your partner.
Meaning like every day that you're not with them is a day they could meet someone else.
Or there could be a little attraction somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I feel like we're going to jump around a lot, but there's so many questions that keep coming up. So you're saying that like when people were 20, 21, graduating college, they were either like already engaged, married, or they were like, holy shit, like now I need to find someone and get married. So were people marrying for the sake of marrying, or were they actually like marrying for love? How often were these relationships based off of love?
No, I think a lot. It's different because love, as we know it today, has been built up in the movies and built up on your social media and all that stuff. You like somebody. You were attracted to them.
I don't know if I disagree, actually. Okay. Because true love, I mean, maybe I was going to use a movie example. So
I knew that.
But like Titanic was set in 1912.
Well, there were very
and that
few
was
people.
Really intense love affair.
Yeah. There were intense love affairs.
Yeah.
But I would say more than most were not intense love affairs. Relationships developed as you ended up being married and living together. That was the one disadvantage of being not really living together in those days. Nobody lived together. That was a taboo in families. So you would not have done that in the 50s, for sure in the 50s, and probably not in the early 60s either. You would get engaged, perhaps or perhaps not have sex with your partner, and get married, and then have children. And that was who you hung out with. Those were your friends. Those were your community, and it worked for most people. It worked. There was not. They were. They didn't look further than being happy and contented with their own family and their units together with their friends. The ones who were discontented got divorced. See, divorce prior in the 50s and 60s was very rare in the early part. So it only really got really bad in the early 70s.
It's funny that it was taboo, like, to live with somebody before marriage, because now it's taboo to not live with somebody before marriage. Like, if a friend came to me and was like, I'm engaged to someone that she was not living with, I'd be like, no, you're not. I'm not allowing you to do that. That's crazy. So it's just funny that that's like.
Well, that's one of the differences between, 2021 and earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It only frightens me to think about where we're going to be in like 20, 30, 40 years of dating and
it might go back to my cycle.
Right. Everything is circular.
Part of me hopes it does. I think even like coming out of the pandemic, people are more intentional. I think people really want to just find somebody and settle down and stop like sleeping around and hooking up. Like they just realize what it's like to kind of be alone and feel isolated, and they don't want that anymore, which I think is like a really good silver lining that came out of the pandemic, is that people are kinder and people are more intentional.
I also think that my only nothing to do with the pandemic, but I've always said this: women have a clock, and the clock ticks. Mm-hmm. Men don't have any clocks. So a woman has to think, am I going to want to have children? A lot of women today don't want children. That's perfectly fine. Those are choices you make. But certainly you want to have children at an age where you are able to pick them up off the floor and carry them around and enjoy them, as well as your husband. Unless you're marrying a guy 30 years older than you on a second time around. Usually it doesn't happen the first time. Mm-hmm. You're marrying someone relatively a similar age, with between 5 and 6 year difference. So you want to enjoy them while you're young. It's always the biggest struggle, because that's when you always have the most problems, when you're first married and then children come into the mix. But that also is growing up together, and relationships get deeper. And that is important, and it won't happen when you're in your 40s. It does not. It's just, that's a different psychology, because then you've already established a career.
But what about like the argument of like, I want to be ready, and like now, like
I don't think you're ever ready.
That's what I was just going to say.
I don't think you're ever ready.
Yeah,
I think
agree.
You get pregnant, you have children, and that's
you figure it out,
and you figure it out as you go. You have to like the person. See, I think the whole thing is liking your partner.
It's not just loving them. It's
not like
them.
Well, sometimes you can love somebody and be the absolute wrong person.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Been there.
Don't have to tell me twice.
you have to really, really like being with them and have same values.
Mhm.
If you don't have the same values, you can have a mad, passionate love affair and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work in the long run. Not saying you should, that, you guys all have a chance to do that and still go on to the next one and say, you know what, this one's a better one to have a relationship with and have a settle down with. There are very different people that are good husbands or good wives. Sometimes they're not always, they can be nice, but they're not the right mate.
Yeah. What do each of you think is the most important value that you hold and that you would look for someone to share?
I know what you're going to say. Nice. Is that what you're going to say?
Well, yeah, it's all right.
Or normal.
Normal.
Oh.
That's so hard to find now.
So, literally every man I go on a date with brings up therapy.
Really? Okay, hold on. I was having this conversation before about how it's almost like obviously I think it's become a trendy thing in TikToks and social media to talk about therapy, and now it's even more so to talk about guys going to therapy.
Yeah.
So I was just talking to someone when we were recording an episode, and she said she thought that this guy was kind of bragging that he had therapy before their date. And she was like, I feel like this is just performative. I don't know.
Yeah.
This is weird. And she showed it to the text to a friend, and the friend was like, he said physical therapy. but
That's so funny.
But even so, it brought up the fact that that is so interesting that every guy's telling you that they're in therapy now.
I think you are hitting the nail on the head, because there was a sweet spot where it wasn't as mainstream when someone was saying that. You're like, oh, they're working on yourself. Now, since they're girls want to hear that I'm doing this. And so then they're saying it, but it may or may not be true. Now it's another thing in the game.
That'd be so messed up if someone was saying that they're in therapy and they're not.
Yeah, I doubt people would really do that, but playing it up, or if they went to therapy once and then they're like, I'm in therapy, there's ways to exaggerate.
Yeah.
But I think you can tell. I mean, if you have emotional intelligence, you can tell if someone's in therapy or not. So I don't think someone could really trick you. But okay, my value, I'm gonna go with. This is hard. I'll go with supportive.
Okay.
That's
good.
Okay.
I like that. I go for that.
Okay.
I still go with normal because I'm hearing too many weird things here. I mean, how many 25, 26-year-old guys who are trying to get a job and are trying to find themselves have to go to therapy unless they're nuts? So,
hey, life is hard these days.
Life is hard, but I think we're making it harder.
Yes.
I think we're making it harder. I really do. I don't think it basically is any different now than when your mom and dad met each other or when my parents met. You met somebody, you have to make a commitment. And the problem is now you've got everybody's face on the media. You've got all this stuff coming out there and everyone is confused. Nobody knows what to do. So they wait and wait and wait and wait. And it's a fear of commitment.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we overcomplicate everything and we look for problems where there aren't any.
Correct.
And we second guess, is this right? Because maybe I'll be a little bit happier or a little bit more in love or feel a little bit more comfortable with the next person. And so I think that is the biggest problem that we face in modern dating right now. And what? No, you're shaking your head.
Maybe I'm a romantic, but I genuinely think if you're having those, maybe there's someone else out there, then you're not with the right person because you won't be downing it with the right person. As you said, we just talked to Ben Higgins from The Bachelor and he was like, when you know, you know. And I believe that.
Well, I think first of all, he's the most charming guy alive, but that's another story.
Yeah.
I don't think you ever know. Honest to God, nobody is perfect. And if you're going to pick somebody apart, as most of you girls seem to do. And it's just an endless stream of somebody never matching up or never getting to where you think it's perfection. Nobody is perfect. And by the way, no marriage or relationship is perfect. So if you're looking for perfection, you better stay by yourself and just do your own thing because it cannot happen.
But I don't think when I say romance, I don't think that means perfection.
No, but I'm saying you can't build it up. You can't build up this fantasy of what should be. You just should be happy. And if the person you're with makes you comfortable and makes you happy and you enjoy being together, that's perfection.
But you're like a logical person and I'm like the opposite.
Right.
So what if there was another person like me with the same romantic mindset?
I think you have to run away from
Okay.
that guy because that guy's not going to work.
Kim, let's chat, because so I've always been the same way as you, where I'm like, I'm going to meet someone and like, I'm going to know it's going to work. It's going to make sense. Like they're going to be the right person. And I've felt that way like many times where I've met someone and I'm like, this is somebody that I need to be with. I need to see this through. Like this person is like, I come home from a first date and I'm like, oh my God, I'm in love. And every single time that has happened, it has not worked out. It has actually like epically failed. And now with my boyfriend, Jake, it's so interesting because it really like, it wasn't like that in the beginning. And the whole time it's just been consistently easy and comfortable and good. And I feel happy and I don't feel anxious at all. And I catch myself saying to my friends and thinking to myself like, well, like, it's like too natural and normal. Like there should be all these other like problems coming up that I've experienced in the past.
Right.
And it's almost like I second guess myself because it's good. And I'm not used to it just being normal and being good because I'm used to like all of this, like all of these emotions that I mistake for like love and romance and passion. That's really just anxiety.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was going to say. There's a lot of psychiatrists and people out there who say like when you're having butterflies, sometimes it's really just like your fight or flight going off, being like, this is not normal. This is bad behavior. And in a way that's like kind of like addicting because you want to like fix the situation or whatever it is. So you like, or you're just misinterpreting that feeling as like love or butterflies when it really is maybe something like anxiety.
Bad match.
Yeah. So I think that's super like common and confusing. I think a lot of people like should have the mindset that you're having with your boyfriend right now of like, this is healthy. But you know, you still there, of course it's a balance and I'm sure you have like, there are moments where you are like excited and like have those you know what I mean? So like, and you can tell the difference. So it is a hard thing though.
Yeah, I do think it was really eye-opening for me just to experience like a normal, healthy relationship after all of like the ups and downs I've faced. So it's definitely been interesting. And I'm trying to just like keep myself keep
yourself on an even keel.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just because, like, not to be negative at all, but like, just because you are in a good thing now doesn't mean, like, God forbid, let's say like this ended, you could always have another unhealthy relationship. And that's what scares me sometimes because I'm like, I've had really healthy ones and then I'll backtrack. And I'm like, how can I backtrack and accept less when I've accepted so much before? And that's what's like scary about like dating and relationships because you think you have a good head on your shoulders and then you find yourself somewhere where you're like, I'm better than this. So like I think as you said, like you're there now, like stick with it because like that sounds really nice.
And I also think that no matter what relationship it is, you should not worry about the bad ones. There are always going to be bad relationships in every person's life. But if you hold on to a good one, and it'll get better and better. And you just keep the faith that that's the way it's supposed to be. And don't look to the left and don't look to the right. Just stay looking forward. That's it.
What is it, like blinders?
Blinders. Yeah. That's all right.
It's one of the hardest things.
Yeah.
I mean, if a guy is losing his hair, don't look. Put a cap on.
Not if
Put a cap on his head. Put a cap on his head. That's it.
But you said to me like a long time ago, pre-podcast, you were like, even when you're in a relationship, like you always are looking at other people. Like you're never like, oh,
well, you're not dead. Nobody's dead. I mean, you know, you still can say, oh, God, he's very handsome.
Right.
Well, I wonder what he would be like. But I mean, you don't do it.
Right.
I mean, that's the difference. The difference is you don't act on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, no, I think there's not a man alive that when he sees a pretty girl come into a room doesn't look. That's just normal. If he isn't, there's something wrong with him.
Yeah, maybe he's not like straight or something.
Yeah.
Like I agree. Like it's so funny because I feel like girls get so like if you're at a party and another girl walks in the room, like they're automatically in a fight with their boyfriend because they're like, how dare you? Why does she exist?
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like
there's always going to be somebody more attractive than you, and like that's life, and that's fine. You can't do much about it. All right, everybody. Right now, as we speak, I am double fisting CBD from Mindset Wellness CBD, my favorite company in the world. In my right hand, I have my rest gummies that I took last night. These taste incredible. It's really part of my nighttime routine. Like I brush my teeth, I get into bed, I take a rest gummy, though I guess that kind of erases the fact that I brushed my teeth, but it's fine. And I slept for like 10 hours, woke up not feeling groggy or like sluggish or anything. And I took a focus gummy because I had a huge day of work. I had this recording and I wanted to really be productive and power through it all. And I did. And I really, truly love Mindset Wellness's products and their CBD gummies, especially. I think I've tried them all at this point and I continuously buy them all because I love them. And I've gotten all my friends hooked on them, but not actually hooked because they're not addictive. So don't worry about that. But they taste amazing, gluten free, non GMO, vegan, all of the things that you want in your gummies. And they're also now available with our code for 10% off and free shipping. So head to mindsetwellnesscbd.com, use code seeing other people at checkout, and enjoy your restful sleep and productive day with your rest and focus gummies. Okay, so Kim, now, of course, you've heard so much about Grandma Gail's dating and relationship experience and what that was like for her. What have you found most surprising about it?
Probably, definitely a few things. Probably we hit on it a little bit, but just like how quickly everything happened. Like as soon as you found someone you were interested in, like there was no overanalyzing. It was just like, we'll go with it. We'll like start our lives together. Obviously, it's not like that today. So that's like probably the biggest thing. Also, just the lack of like sexual partners. Like that's a huge difference than it is today. It's just funny to me that like that was normal, but I understand with like birth control and like things like in science why it was not a thing. But those are like my two main ones, I think.
All right.
Right?
Okay.
Am I missing something?
No, you're not missing a thing. I think you hit it right on the head.
Do you
You're
ever
very smart.
wish that you could have that experience where it's just like easy and there's no overthinking and all that?
Of course. Well, first of all, I'm a huge overthinker and overanalyzer, so I don't know how I would have existed in that time, but I'm like, maybe that is actually why I'm so obsessed like this podcast or anything, like with the 50s, it's like the mid to late 50s. I watch every movie from that time. I listen to every song from that time. Like I try to live my life a lot of the time as if I'm in the 1950s. And like a lot of like, I had a friend over yesterday who was like, with the music and everything around the house, they were like, are we in a time machine? Like what era is this? But I love to live that way because I think it was a better time. That said, at that time, I think it's because ignorance was bliss. If I was in it and knew what was possible for women in 2021, I would not pick that time. I think the people who existed during that time existed in a bubble and like, great. But like knowing that I would have had less opportunity and everything else, of course, as a woman, I'm always going to pick today as the day that I want to exist in and date in. But I do glorify that time. It's like golden era syndrome, I think it's called.
No, well, I have to tell you what it really was. It was a simpler time.
Mm-hmm.
You're post World War II. You're really just America's really coming out of the war, and people were starting to buy houses and build in communities where they were having families because this was a whole different time. And especially when I was growing up, everything was wonderful. I mean, everybody would sit around the TV and watch Milton Berle. I mean, that or Sid Caesar, and you'd laugh together as a family, and you wouldn't see the terrible things that you see on the television. You wouldn't see the violence. You wouldn't see. But it
existed. That's why I'm saying ignorance.
I'm sure it existed, but we didn't see it.
Right.
And but it really didn't exist like that. We had different types of violence. You had many different issues in the 50s and 60s that weren't pleasant. Don't misunderstand me. But we didn't have violence on our phones. Our kids weren't watching that all the time. And I think that's a very big difference today. And from that period to now. And that's why people say it's the golden age of television. It's a golden age of comedy, of theater. You had Oscar Hammerstein. You had the Lerner and Loewe. You had all the beautiful things that were really coming out at that particular moment in time because everybody was released from the war and everybody was looking for a better place. Now you're in a different place. It's a whole different society. You can't really go back. You can never go home again, like my mother said. Don't go home. Look forward. Your time is now. And you can never really go back and look at it from another perspective. You have to look at it from 2021.
Well, you definitely can't go back and look at it since the house no longer exists.
Oh, that broke me up. I can't even go back to the town anymore. It got me so down in the dumps.
I can relate. I can imagine that it would break my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting. Like it was a simpler time because you were focused on the things in front of you. You were able to enjoy the stuff that was on TV. You were able to enjoy being with your family and like living in these new communities. You were able to enjoy comedy in the theater and not get like a citizen notification that there's a fight breaking out in the subway downstairs. And so I think I do envy that because we're all so distracted by everything that's going on. And we could turn the news on or open Twitter or anything and find out like who's getting killed and what bombs are being set off around the world. And it is
But, like, we need to know.
We need to know, but you know what I was thinking when Alana was talking? We had rules. There were rules to be followed. You had to respect your parents. There was no conversation. You could hate your parents, but you had to respect them. You had to respect your country. You had to respect your faith. There were definitely rules in the 50s and 60s that were broken after Vietnam. You see, everything came in a cycle. Vietnam came, that was the end of everything. And then, of course, you had the desegregation. You had all these issues in the 60s.
Like, there were rules, but like, not to make it too political, but like those rules had to be broken because it was a corrupt society, and it still does need to be broken today.
It wasn't that it was a corrupt society; it was an unfair society.
Correct.
But the truth is, it was when you're talking about when I was dating and when I was growing up, it was a period that America was very naive. It was not. Then it changed. It was maybe a 15-year period. That's all it lasted. 1945 to 1964. Yeah, 20 years. It was basically, that was a moment in time. And then after that, you had a different period of discussion and problems. We had more violence in the 60s and the early 70s than you have today. And today we have plenty of violence, but nobody wants to go back and think about that. It was a very tough time to live in New York City in the early 70s. And I remember it well. We had all kinds of fights in the street and fires and vandalism. If they think what's going on today is like puppy love compared to what happened in those days. So there were social revolutions all the time. And what you have to, guys, consider when you're dating is try to find some little haven where you can be happy and not be caught up in this, because that's what a relationship is. It's like almost like a little cocoon where two people can be together and be happy and take out all the external stuff, if you can do it. And that's where best relationships come about. If you let the outside things influence a relationship, it's going to be in trouble and probably be doomed in the long run.
I love that, because it also is like our source of happiness should be from relationships, both like familial, romantic, and friendships. Right. It shouldn't be the source of stress. Right. And like, I forget that, and people forget that all the time. Yeah.
It's shocking to like not feel stressed. Like, it's shocking to go on a date with anyone and then come home and not feel this like instant like pang of anxiety in you. Yeah. And so I do think that Greg Miguel, the way you said that was really great. Okay, we're turning the tables now. What have you found most surprising about the way Kim and my generation dates now?
I haven't found it surprising. I actually think it's depressing. So you can't go by me. I find dating two beautiful girls like you and Kimberly, dating different guys who I'm sure are all nice. I'm sure none of these guys.
In some cases, the same guys.
Yeah, well, that was a moment in time. Yeah. But I've seen some of Kim's dates, and I know some of them, and they're very nice men and very lovely. But I think what happens is somebody's always thinking about, maybe it's not perfection. Maybe this is not exactly what I want. And this becomes a very big dilemma, because I'm not sure anybody can live up to that expectation. So I'm hoping, in Kim's case, and I'm sure in your case, you're finding a happy medium now, that people understand one another and are not looking for something that's completely ridiculous. I mean, nobody is Ozzie and Harriet. I mean, nobody lives.
I don't know who that is.
Oh, Ozzie and Harriet was a family program in the 50s where the husband and wife were perfect, the children were perfect, and it was unbelievable. And people tried to emulate that and couldn't do it, and they were frustrated. I think relationships are made not to be perfect. Nothing is perfect. You're going to have a fight. You're going to fight over money. You're going to fight over children. Basically, those are your two biggest fights that everybody has. You're going to fight over perhaps ideas, political ideas, religious ideas. but it has to be with respect. If you can do it nicely and talk things out, then you've got a chance. If everything is constantly in motion and everything is always an argument, then I would run away from that relationship. You have to basically have a core where you both agree on something and build on it. Because it's a building block situation. Nothing is, there's no relationship in the world that just happens. I think that's ridiculous today, and it was ridiculous then. Then it was something we had to do. We did it blind because we didn't live with somebody. So the first time we knew anybody's hang-ups or whether they put their clothes away or brushed their teeth on the left side or the right side was after we got married. That's not so good. You have it a little easier. You already know what the person's bad habits could be.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to live with them. If you're not able to live with them now, you avoid divorce. It saves a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you think with the whole perfection concept, do you think that eventually people decide like, oh, well, like I can't find perfection, so I'll just settle? Or do you think they learn over time that perfection isn't what they should be looking for?
Well, that's what I hope happens a lot. I mean, I think, in my opinion, they should not be striving for perfection.
Right.
And if they are, they're going to constantly be upset because nobody is perfect. But I don't know. Kimmy has to address that from her point of view.
That's so interesting that you say that, because that's what I was like trying to like formalize into words. Like when you say stop seeking for perfection, I interpret that as, okay, so I'll settle.
No, it's not settling. It's not settling because I think there's no individual who's perfect. If you look at yourself, not everybody has a perfect nose, a perfect eye, a perfect ear, a perfect foot size. I mean, you're not dealing with the Mona Lisa. So if you're not dealing with the Mona Lisa right away, and both you're feeling what beauty is and what something should be, it's not that you're looking for, you're settling.
But okay,
you're being realistic.
I'm going to put
realistic
this into
is a better
an example
word.
Because like I'm trying to think, like I don't search for perfection, so I'm a little confused like why you think that. But you're saying something like, if I'm like I really don't like the way he chooses food. Like I haven't said that before, but I've said similar things like that before about people. And you'll be like, you got to stop. But if I really get irked out by the way he chooses his food, like why do I have to like accept that? I don't.
Well, then it's ridiculous. Maybe I don't like the way you order a kale salad. I mean,
well, then we're not
this
meant
is
to be.
I mean, there are certain things that over time you have to learn. Yes. Okay. Right. So Logan Ury, who is a behavioral scientist, dating coach, and the author of How to Not Die Alone, she always talks about permissible pet peeves versus deal breakers. And something like chewing with their mouth open.
Well, that could be a deal breaker.
It depends.
No.
Or like, it depends. You have to kind of decide for yourself, like, what are you willing to bend on and what will you break over, So it's kind of picking and choosing, like, what things could you really not have like a happy life and a strong partnership over? And is it that they fully prioritize work and don't come home till 11 o'clock every night, and when they get home they're exhausted and want to go straight to bed? Or is it that you don't like the way they chew?
Right. I understand like that one is a big thing and one is a small thing. I just think if every time you're hanging out with somebody you're getting peeved off even by small things, like then
it's no good.
Then that's not right. You know?
Yeah. Well, then that's no good. Nobody should be peeved off with their dates.
Especially in the beginning.
It's bad enough when you're married and you're peeved off. Don't get peeved. In the beginning, it should be quite pleasant. If there are issues that are really, really annoying and there are too many of them, then go move on. There are too many fish in the sea.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're noticing like a lot of different issues from the beginning, then don't bother pushing through.
Right. But if it's like just the chewing. I had a girlfriend who broke up with someone, this was a long time ago, broke up with someone because of the way he slurped his soup. And she's sticking by it. She's like, it really was just horrible. She never thought about it.
Did she ever say it to him? Did she ever bring it up and give him the chance?
Actually, she might have. I'm not sure.
I'm a soup slurper, so I'm a little self-conscious right about now.
You'll find, hopefully your boyfriend doesn't care about that.
But maybe he slurps.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't think we've had soup together yet. It is such an interesting
slurpers
thing.
Find slurpers.
Yes, and I didn't know about my soup slurping habits until somebody addressed it to me. And then I was like having soup one night with my family, and I was like, oh my God, these people are so loud. And suddenly I realized it, but I didn't realize it before because I grew up surrounded by it. So I just like my brain kind of put it in like the normal category.
That's so funny. This is like kind of a tangent, but like on the topic of food, I was out with a few couples this weekend, fifth wheeling. And they were like, there's always one person in a couple who likes olives and the other one like hates olives. I think that might be from like, they might've said it was from How I Met Your Mother or something like that. But is that true for you?
No, Poppy and I both love olives.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we both love olives.
I was gonna say, I was on a double date last night, and it was me and my friend's fiance were the ones who liked olives, but neither other one.
I'm telling you. I think it's
olives
a lot of
are a thing.
Yes, I think some of the times it's true.
All right.
Wow, learn something
I
new
love
every
olives,
day.
so like anyone listening who doesn't like olives, you know where to find me. At Kim Mercy on Instagram.
Let's do it. Okay, let's get into some listener questions. So one actually kind of brings us back to something we talked about before, and it's why does our 20s feel so much harder to figure out than it did for our parents? And I think the answer from earlier was that it's not harder to figure out. We just overcomplicate it.
I think that's basically what you decided.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
I think so too. I think that like I think our generation has a mindset in general of like we're smarter, we're better, like we don't want to like make the mistakes the generations before us had. So I think it applies to dating as many other things of just like we can be picky, we can be choosy, and we're going to make like the best decisions possible. And sometimes that just like carries over and takes a little bit longer, I guess. But I think it's probably just like millennials being on their high horse.
Yeah. I also
Every
think
generation always thinks that they're the smartest.
Yeah. I also think it's like we know how much we're struggling, but like we see our parents and we don't know how much they actually struggled. Like we don't know if they had a hard time or if it came easy or if they were really like truly happy with their choices and everything. So I think it's a lot of like we're the first person in this situation of our 20s and it's hard to look at someone else's experience similarly to how we see other people in relationships or going on dates and we're like, why is it so hard for me but so easy for them?
Right. Also, the older generations don't get it, which can be frustrating because they didn't. Like, we really are the first ones to grow up with apps and all of these other things. So, like, if they're putting the pressure on you, why aren't you married? Why don't you have a baby? Why aren't you settled down? You're 35, whatever it is. Like, you don't get what it is like to date today. So I think it's very frustrating coming from our perspective as well. And I think that's like just, I guess, like a huge difference generationally, because it's just like you just can't as much as I can tell you every episode,
can't relate.
You really can't because you're not living through it.
Yeah, I agree. How do we let go of the past or past relationships?
I still cry about them.
Me too.
She does. She's a crier. She's a crier. I tell her to suck it up.
But then
I tell her to suck it up. I can't listen to it.
I know. There was a point recently where you were just like, you got to stop bringing it to me. I was like, who am I supposed to talk to about it? You're like, I can't listen about him anymore. I can't take it.
It wasn't worth the cry.
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Right.
That's an interesting, that, let's back up. It wasn't worth the cry. I wonder, I wish I could go back and think about like the people I've cried over. And in hindsight, some of them, it's like, what was I thinking? Do you ever think that?
Yes and no. I think like I don't really have regrets. I don't.
You don't have that many that you really, really were upset about.
That's true.
Because you really had one very good relationship and then a lot of smaller things. So it's really, you haven't been in serious other relationships.
Yeah. But the small ones that I have cried over, I think I would never be like, why was I crying about that? Because I believe that my emotions were valid in the time I was having them. And I really don't, I'm very like an outwardly emotional person. So when people are like, why are you so sensitive? Why are you whatever? I don't subscribe to that. Like I felt those things and I'm going to like emote and that's what it is. So no, I don't ever look back and wonder like why I cried over someone. But I think what we're saying is that like the sympathy around it for other people sometimes goes down. Like if you are crying one day about it and continuously go back to something that might not be healthy for you, your friends and your family aren't gonna like have you cry on their shoulder every time and see you repeat the same mistakes. I think that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, it is tough. And I do agree with that. And with what I said about like, why did I cry over these people? I don't mean like my tears weren't valid. Like I like completely agree with you. Like when I have emotions, like I emote as well. And I do think it's so interesting sometimes how someone and something could seem like the biggest deal in the world.
Yeah.
And then later it's like, that was nothing. And I think for me, the reasons that I've gotten so emotional and so upset and have like felt so much pain after different endings of relationships and situationships is because each one kind of piled on the other, and they were all almost for like similar reasons. And so it just felt like the same exact thing happening
It's bigger
again
than the person.
and again
Also.
and again.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And you take off your rose-colored glasses, and that's why you're like seeing it clearly, because you're not like in it and like clouded by like charm or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And going back to the original question, just how to let go of the past, it just takes time.
Right.
It really takes time, and like let yourself feel your emotions, let yourself cry, let yourself do what you need to do. Don't talk someone's ear off if they're not willing to listen, because then that's going to end up not being helpful. But find things that get your mind off of it, and do little things every day that help you move forward.
Yeah, it's true. And I also think I kind of do believe that like you never fully let your last person go until you're in your next thing. I wouldn't say like shift your obsession from one person to another. Like it really, and I'm still working on this, like you are your priority. Like you should be thinking about yourself, but that's much easier said than done. I think like your space that you have in yourself for like your romantic relationship with someone else, like you can't fill that on your own. That's impossible. So I think that like you should be good with it open. Like you shouldn't be like depressed, but I think that like it's never really full until you find like the next person.
Mm-hmm.
Agree?
Yeah, and I also don't think you girls should be so hard on yourselves. I think it's fair. This is part of growing up. Everybody, wait till really big problems happen. So, and which they will happen, in everybody's life. So, yes, it's a breakup. Yes, it's sad, but it's not a death, and it's not. You're going to go on and put it in sort of a little bit of a perspective. So, and everybody has a breakup. That's a very normal thing. I think that's the only way you'll know if the right person is coming along, because you've had a lot of experiences that have not worked out. And hopefully, eventually, if the one like you're having, Alana, is good right now, hopefully that's built on a lot of old experiences that were not so good. So you're not repeating the same thing again.
This is like a hot take, but as I'm thinking like, like everyone goes through breakups. So like sometimes it's hard, like you can sympathize with people, but like to a point, like the same way, like everyone has birthdays and people like to make like a big deal exciting on your birthday. It's like, it's exciting for a day. Maybe I'll like participate, but like when you're celebrating your birthday every day for a month, like fuck you. No one wants to like do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like everyone has a birthday. Everyone has breakups. Like you do it. It's part of life.
That's right.
That's what it is.
And I will say one thing that made me think of is like, you'll learn who makes you feel better and who makes you feel worse when you're going through a breakup. And you'll learn like it's okay that there are some friends that you don't go to for comfort. And it's okay that there are some friends that you're going to lean on more because they're the ones that are there for you. And I think that's something that I've learned a lot over the last few years, that not every friend is going to be my person to hold my hand through everything. And you got to figure out who is right for what situation.
Mm-hmm. Also, what helps, like last thing with letting go is like if you like therapy, obviously, but like if you can't afford a therapist or whatever it is, listening to podcasts is actually really helpful. Not to do like a plug, but like listen to Seeing Other People, listen to Excuse My Grandma, because we talk about these topics, you feel like you're not alone, and that like really helps with like letting things go and moving on as well.
Yes, that is exactly why we do what we do.
Yep.
One last question, because I'm curious for the different responses from you two. Is it okay to share what you feel after a third date?
After a first date.
Third.
Share with each other?
Yeah. Right?
Share with the man and the woman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Or
know what I'm
woman.
gonna say,
Yeah.
You go first.
I don't think on a third date you have much of a feeling. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you do. I mean, you could like them, but I don't think it would be instant love after 3 dates. That's a little fast for me. But you can say, I think he's terrific, or I think she's terrific. But I think 3 dates for me is a little too fast. You need to prove yourself a little more than 3 dates. 3 dates, I'm still waiting for the roses.
Yeah. I mean, it's not about proving yourself though. It's just like sharing how you feel with the other person. It's tough because I think like a pulse check is very, very important. Maybe not after 3, but like maybe to just be like, hey, by the way, like I want to keep going out. Like I like hanging out with you.
Different. Yeah, that's different.
Yeah.
But I don't know if after 3 dates you can say, I'm madly in love.
No. I mean, if someone even
realistic.
asked to be exclusive after 3 dates, I would have a huge problem with that.
I think I would too.
Yeah, it's just like a red flag to me. But I think that saying like, hey, I really like you once is great. More than once, I think I would get the ick.
You got creeped. You had somebody that doing that. You didn't like it.
Yes, I really don't.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's great. It's healthy to let somebody know that you're excited about where this is and where things are going, or that you enjoy hanging out with them. But I wouldn't say like, I finally like I've been looking for someone like you my whole life. Like
No.
I wouldn't. Don't dump on them. Like don't
show your cards.
Don't do too much. Don't do too much. It's okay to be like vulnerable, and it's okay to be open and honest about how you're feeling, but don't give it all away, because that might scare someone.
Yeah. I think it's more scary than anything else, because I think emotions can't build that quickly after 3 dates.
Yeah. And
you can enjoy being with somebody and say, listen, I love being with you. Let's hang out more. That's fair. But to say, I'm madly in love with you and I can't live without you after 3 dates, I would send him to a shrink.
The reason it's scary is because more likely than not, the other person won't be on the same page. And people are really turned off or scared by the idea of like someone moving faster than you are or someone moving slower than you are. You always want to be like mutual with the person you're with. And like, it's a weird, well, I know you're going to say guys should like girls more than girls like guys.
Absolutely.
That's the other aspect to it, I guess. But like on a more or less like level, like you want to be on the same page. And I think if you're like, oh, I have 5 other dates this week, and he's like, we're getting married, that's weird.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't do that anyway. And by the time you really like somebody, you're not dating 5 or 6 people at a time. You've sort of eliminated it down to maybe 2.
Yes, you've cut the roster off.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for joining the show and coming on Seeing Other People. Would you like to let everyone know where they can find Excuse My Grandma, where they can listen to it, follow, all that?
Yes. So you can listen to Excuse My Grandma anywhere you listen to podcasts, on Spotify. She always says Shopify. Apple Podcasts and all of that. You can follow us on Instagram at Excuse My Grandma and on TikTok at Excuse My Grandma. Or my personal Instagram is at Kim Merstein.
And enjoy. We had a good time this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.